Hi, everybody. Welcome to Topline Spotlight. Topline Spotlight is a special segment where we dive deep on an exciting entrepreneur, go-to-market operator, or executive's challenge. We're spending some time today with Shensi Ding, the CEO and co-founder of an incredible company called Merge. I'm Sam Jacobs, the CEO of Pavilion. We've got Asit on the line. He's the CEO of Sales Talent Agency. Shensi, welcome to Topline Spotlight.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
We're excited to have you. So, for those that don't know about Merge, tell us what the company does, a little bit about the founding story, the origin. Give us a little bit of background.
Yeah, absolutely. So Merge, we're around 110 people in San Francisco, New York City, and Berlin. We help companies add integrations to their product. So it is a one-to-many API. You integrate once, you can get normalized data to read and write back to 200 integrations. It's been around 4.5 years. I met my co-founder in college, so we've known each other for a really, really long time. Both studied computer science and both ended up at startups in San Francisco that needed a lot of integrations in very different roles and industries. So after school, I went into more of like a finance and operations career path, during doing banking, then private equity, and then joining a startup as chief of staff. Gil, my co-founder, was the best software engineer in our class, went straight into software engineering, moved straight to San Francisco, worked in big tech before moving to a smaller startup and then became founding engineer at a much smaller recruiting tech company. So I was working in cybersecurity, he was working in recruiting tech, pretty different industries, but both of our companies really needed integrations. And I think me seeing it from a P&L perspective and how not having these integrations really limited our TAM, and it also building these integrations was super, super expensive. It started piquing my interest as something that I was curious why no one had solved it yet. And Gil, at the same time, he was head of engineering and building these integrations for his company because they just didn't have the engineering resources. And he was sharing about how it was just such a painful experience for them to get access to the API, get a sandbox, get a partnership, build these integrations, and then long-term, the maintenance was really the most time-consuming part in the customer support. And so no one was really solving this problem. We started off with a problem, and 4.5 years later, now we have Merge. So it's been really, really exciting.
That's awesome. What and tell us a little bit about the in terms of like the growth trajectory of the business. It was just, how much money have you raised? You mentioned that you've got 3 different offices. Where are you in your journey? And I'm also curious about like the pricing model. How do you structure the pricing? Is it a flat fee? Is it a usage-based model? Tell us a little bit about sort of the go-to-market motion for it.
For sure. So we came out of stealth around 3.5 years ago. So we've really been like out in the market for 3.5 years. We opened our Berlin office in January last year. So it's still pretty new, but we've been international from the start, partially because we started during COVID. And during COVID, because every sales meeting was on Zoom and everyone had moved remote, you just ended up doing a lot of sales meetings with everyone all across the globe. But our pricing models changed quite a bit from when we first started. When we first started, it was just like, okay, who is going to use our product? Thank you. Here's a price that we think is appropriate. And then after that, it became a little bit more rigid towards usage. So it was more just like, okay, like how many rows of data are you using? Specifically objects within certain categories, and we would price you for those rows. But as we started launching more product lines, it became a little bit more confusing for our sales team. It was easier when it was just a few product lines and just me and Gil. But when you start hiring more salespeople and start having a lot more customers and more things to sell, it was just complicated. So we simplified our pricing model around last year. So currently our pricing plan is a platform fee. So it's a flat rate depending on what company size you are. So a professional plan is for like more mid-sized companies, and enterprise plan is for like enterprise companies that need a lot of support, shared Slack channel, SLAs, and also just more security. And there's a usage fee on top. So per connection that occurs, we incur a fee. And it simulates a lot of what happens like if you were to build those integrations in-house, because there is a large upfront fee, and there's a maintenance cost involved to maintain those integrations. But then you also have server and storage costs as you add more customers on.
Super cool. Awesome. The subject of the show is really a challenge around a business problem that you've solved in the last 12 to 24 months. What was it for you?
So for us, it was finding our CRO or a revenue leader at the current stage that we were at. So apologies, I think I forgot to answer this question, but we raised our Series B end of 2022, and it was a really tough time period to fundraise. So we, like a lot of companies were dying. We also were selling mostly to SMBs, but we were really lucky to have Excel invest in us and take a bet on us so that we would have that time to figure out like how we moved to enterprise and also just grow up in terms of our go-to-market motion. And I needed to find a revenue leader that would be able to help us do that. But we're 5 days a week in the office, only based in San Francisco and New York City at the time. And I really needed to find someone that would be able to implement a lot of discipline and be extremely technical and be open to working with me and Gil, just because we were creating a new product. It's not something where you can just go in and then take over an existing product and just say you're better than them. We're educating. You have to like market a lot. You also have to go on site and really get a lot of trust from these people because we're core infrastructure. So if there's an outage, like they're fucked. And so we just really need to make sure that we're like we're getting a really involved go-to-market leader that it fits all of those criteria. And it was tough. Very, very tough. That was the challenge.
Tell us a little bit about how you went about solving that problem, because the median tenure for a CRO is 1.8 years, which basically indicates that more often than not, companies get it wrong. And there's so much literature and so much conversation. A lot of it is through Topline and Pavilion around why those mistakes happen, why these problems occur, how to hedge against them. Tell us your thinking. You realize I need to hire a CRO. Probably haven't hired a CRO before. But I need this like really unique person who can fit into this organization, who can sell without a big brand behind them and sell against something where there might not be budget already, and educate a customer and bring them on board and create discipline. How did you think about solving this? How did you structure the solution in your mind and then go about operationalizing that?
So it wasn't structured, but I did have a process. So what I wanted to do is first just collect as much information as possible about like what is out there and what are great sales leaders like. So I started listening to a lot of podcasts with like sales leaders, just trying to see like what the different styles were. We're not a PLG company. We are very much like an enterprise sales motion. And I needed to find sales leaders that were more in that line. But there are a lot of different styles. There's like different types of companies. Like, did I need to have an infrastructure revenue leader? Did I have to have like an API one? Like what companies were great targets too. And so I listened to a lot of podcasts, and then I started doing a lot of outbounding too. And at the same time, we did get an agency to help do some outbounding and sourcing for us on the side. But my firm believer is that if you are the founder or a hiring manager, you need to be in control of your life. You need to be in control of your recruiting pipeline, and you need to be sourcing at all times. Because if you're just seeing what's getting handed to you, that might not be the best. And if you're going out there, you're looking at like hundreds of LinkedIn's every night, and you're able to see what is out there, you're able to just get more pattern recognition for is what's coming to me the best? Is this going to be a good match for me?
Especially that early part of what you said, I really resonate with it, because I think there's so many early stage founders who've never hired for this role before, who are very technical. So they haven't even hung out with these people all that much. They can't differentiate good versus bad. They don't know what great looks like. And then they just start solving the problem without trying to first create an image in their mind of what great looks like. And it's something we've started adding in our processes. Do you even know what great looks like? Let's get you in front of people that are world class. Now you have an image in your mind. Now you can go through a process. So you did that. You figured out what great looks like. You started sourcing on your own. How did that go? Like sourcing for a CRO, like building, finding people, reaching out to them. What was that experience like? What worked? What didn't work?
I mean, you just have to spend the hours. Like, there's no answer to recruiting other than hours. You have to like outbound, you have to find people, and they might not be like in certain locations that you filter for on LinkedIn. And you also just have to shoot your shot. Also, some people would ignore me for like a few times, but after like a few outreaches, then they would finally respond and I would be able to get a call. But not only was it like helpful for actually getting candidates in pipeline, it was helpful for me just learning more about what was out there. And I think just from seeing all the talent that was out there, I realized, one, we needed a traditional enterprise sales motion. Two, I needed someone who was going to be like hardcore. So I needed like an old school medic person. Hopefully someone
you learned what medic is along the way.
And hopefully someone who is like from like the PTC family, or like, like
I
learned
all that shit out.
I know, I learned a lot. And so I specifically started targeting companies from those backgrounds after I learned more, because I did interviews with people who weren't from that background. And it was pretty clear to me that wasn't going to be a fit for us. I needed someone who was going to be hardcore and like old school, but then also open to learning. Yeah. And I outbounded like probably thousands of people. And then I got probably like 100 interviews. And that process also taught me a lot because a lot of people don't want to do anything really hard. We were still too early because they'd already made it, or they were just not willing to really commit to a company because we were 5 days a week in the office and it was going to be hard. Like they were going to have to work a lot. They were going to have to figure out what the enterprise sales motion looked like. And we weren't really enterprise ready. But yeah, then I found Travis and he was the only person I wanted to give an offer to that I was really excited about. I talked to him, he was intense. And also I didn't even know that he was famous, but our recruiter was like, oh my God, he responded to you. And then after he did respond to me, it was really up to me to one, evaluate him, but also sell him on the opportunity.
What worked for you in terms of getting him on side? Like when you click into, there's so many conversations one can have with a person in a recruitment process. And there's so many different points at which you can have those conversations. And I think picking the right things to focus on, sequencing it the right way, while still doing your due diligence on the person is actually a much harder problem to solve than it sounds. What are some of your lessons around this is how it worked for us? We spoke about these core things that got the excitement. This is the stuff. This is how I did my due diligence on alignment and fit, and got him to want to work here.
So I'll talk about the company and I'm genuinely excited by it. And I think if you're talking about your company to a candidate, you can't sound like you fucking hate it and that you're bored, right? You have to sound like you're really excited and you're what you're going to be building. And this is why it's going to have a huge impact on every other company that you're talking to or trying to sell to. And so that's what I think you do. But if someone's not interested in that or they don't care and then they don't ask you questions and they're not intrigued by it, I at that point, I know I can keep pressing and try to force them to be into it. But if they're not, they're probably not, I can't force it. There is a little bit of they have to be genuine. They have to be a little bit interested. Yeah, you guys come together. So I would talk about merge in that first recruiting conversation, just be okay, are you interested? Is this something you actually want to double click on, or do you just care about what the metrics are or investors are, what the path is for headcount? If that's all you care about, this might not be the right fit because as an enterprise sales leader or as a sales leader, you're shaping the product roadmap. So you need to actually care and you need to care about that. So that was the first step. I try to see if you're excited. And if you're really excited, boom, we're moving to the next step. But what I also do, I bring up everything that's not good up front. I tell them I'm a demanding founder. I work a lot. You don't have to work as much as me, but I work a lot. And and there are situations where I'm going to need you to really step up. Are you okay with that? Are you okay with 5 days a week in the office? Are you okay with adding a lot of discipline?
Slack messages.
Yeah. And I needed to be upfront about that because if you're going to be oh my God, why did she message me on Saturday? This isn't going to work. I can't hide who I am if we are going to be an executive that I am really, really going to be relying on to build this business. So it's partially the sell, but then I have to be very honest about what is not good about the business and what is not good about working with me, because otherwise it's not going to be a good partnership.
I think the CEO CRO fit is such an important element of when hiring this person. If you two can't work well together, it just won't work, even if objectively both are really good separately. What was something you learned in this process that was a little bit counter to the advice you might have gotten from all the people that you spoke to about doing this? Oh, you just got really good advice, man.
Yeah, to be honest, I just didn't get that much advice that I listened to. I think a lot of people were here's these good companies, you should recruit from them. I'm not going to list the names, but I didn't like anyone there. I felt what they had done was they had joined easy companies and it was always easy. And then they got to rely on that, the rocket ship of the business over what they actually contributed.
That's interesting. So product market fit was kind of what drove their success more than execution.
Yeah. And I think especially for a lot of people, they really relied on a brand name. And that's why they would be able to get hired, but they didn't actually do anything. They just relied on the business, everyone else around them, contributing to it. And so I think I think I just realized that some companies were just not going to be good fits despite how well they were doing, despite how famous they were. And also despite what everyone's a perception of the team was.
One of the biggest the conventional wisdom against a hire like the way that you described it, which is old school PTC, medic trained, is exactly sort of to the point of your main criteria, which is somebody that can be super intense in the office 5 days a week and isn't just coasting on the brand or their business card. How do you and there's probably, you know, not from you, but there's probably some level of latent kind of ageism in some of the feedback or advice that you might get, meaning somebody with that much experience maybe isn't as technically sophisticated as they might need to be or as up to date on new technologies. How did you balance probably, I mean, or maybe you didn't need to balance it, but how did you balance this idea that I need a big name CRO? We're building $1 billion business. At the same time, at the time, you're a smaller scale business. You weren't really at the stage of Splunk or the other places that Travis may have worked. So how do you balance those ideas and in the interview process to have the confidence? Because it sounds like it's worked out well. It's coming up on 2 years of the hire, and hopefully we're moving past the 18-month average tenure for a CRO. So how did you balance that in the interview process to get the confidence to say, because I think you even mentioned that he had signed another offer letter before you got him to cancel that offer and come join you?
No, so he actually did join them, but it didn't work out, and he could tell, and then so he came back. And also because I'm psycho, he was the only person who really wanted. He was the only. I like whenever we have such an opinionated like culture, and it's very specific. Like only a few people will do well at Merge, and so oftentimes when we find someone, we only give one offer. And that person accepts because it's mutually such a good fit. He didn't accept, but I knew in my heart, like I was like, I think he's going to be the right person for us. So yes, maybe he's more old school, but he genuinely was curious about our product. He was really interested in learning like how we were thinking about things. And he was open to being really creative. And like to this day, in the 2 years that he's been here so far, he's really shaped a lot of like how he messaged the product, how we go out to market, how do we think about our product. And it's just been really awesome. And I think there's sometimes in the company, like like that first journey to 10 million, all of it was just like, it was just blood, sweat, and tears. Like we just like worked a lot. Like we just nonstop were working, like making a lot of personal and physical sacrifices to put in the hours for that. But after a certain point, it's about making really good decisions. And a lot of times that means like experience with not just like selling, but people. And I knew that point when I needed a CRO, it was experience with both, not just working. And so I think like just meeting Travis and seeing how it was a good combination of all of them. Also, like Gil and I are kind of weird too. Like we're not, you know what I mean? Like we're not like super like, work-life balance friendly. And I do think a lot of like new generation is a little bit more like that. So I think because of that, like we might have just had a lot of like natural chemistry and it just worked really well.
How did you deal with the mental aspect of I've made an offer, he didn't accept, he's accepted something else. I really want this guy, but now he's technically out of the mix. And what usually happens is founders then make a compromise. They either have to start the process from scratch or they go after the second or the third candidate, right? Because they're like, okay, this person's gone. I need to put somebody in this seat as well. You waited and you waited. You had a hunch, you waited, and you kept scratching at him to make him the solution to the problem. How did you like deal with that mentally? Because there must have been pressure. The agency must have been saying, hey, just like, let's do this. And investors are like, do this. And you did something totally different. How did you figure that out?
Just be really psycho. I think
that's all advice over here is just be psycho. Like,
just care less about what people think. And also because maybe fortunately and unfortunately, a lot of people have not like at first not joined Merge and then come back. And so maybe at that point it had been like three people, and including one executive had said yes or no and then come back and then ended up working out. And so I think because I had intuition and a gut feeling because I had hundreds of interviews at that point. And I was like, I'm going to keep pursuing. I'm just going to see what happens. And I also knew the company that he had signed with. I was like, this is not it. This is not going to be the right fit for him. Like he needs like a certain level of like intensity and like sales appreciation. Because at that point also with my research, I gained a lot of appreciation for like the history of like medic sales. And I think that's hard to find, especially with like technical founders and young founders. And so I had a lot of appreciation for it and I really wanted that at Merge.
PTC still,
I wanted Merge to be like an iconic sales team. And that only really happens with some of these sales leaders.
I love that. PTC still holds the record for the most consecutive quarters where they beat expectations in the public market. Still holds the record.
Thanks to John McMahon. Shensi, we're at the end of our time together, but one of the last things we like to do is pay it forward a little bit with ideas, people, content that's influenced you. When you think about it like that, I understand you're psycho and you're working 18 hours a day. If there's any space in your brain, Sherlock Holmes only had space in his brain for things that were going to help him solve crimes. If there's any space in your brain for things that are not about Merge, what are they and how have they influenced you, and share them with our audience?
I think reading a lot is really helpful, especially books that aren't like Silicon Valley or business books. So I do read a lot of like fiction, like Oprah's book club, Reese Witherspoon book club. I'm still a woman, right? And I think it's nice to do that, because a lot of the perspectives of like the characters are things that I just like I would never have experienced in my life, or like family situations, or just like scenarios. And so I think it's the only reading is like the only way to truly get a break, because your brain is involved in like what is happening in the book, versus if you're watching TV, you're just a passenger and you're not like fully involved in that scenario. So it's mostly just reading, and then like fitness. I think that's like what's really important to me. But yeah, reading has always been.
Give us a book. What's a book that you love?
Right now, I just finished American Dirt, which is about a woman who is immigrating from Mexico to the United States, and that was just really interesting for me. I hadn't read a book like that recently, and right now I'm also reading oh my God, what it's called, something beautiful. I forget. Yeah, and
American Dirt. I'll look it up. That sounds great.
It was really good. Yeah, it was controversial, but I mean, sometimes you just need to read like a book that goes by easily. Yeah, and then I'm also reading another book, but I don't want to tell you because it's I don't want it to be on public record.
Oh, fair enough. Okay, no problem. If folks want to reach out to you, maybe they want to work for Merge, maybe they want to learn more about the company, what's the best way to get in touch?
Yes. So you can always just apply for Merge at merge.dev/careers. You can also email me at Shensi@merge.dev. I love getting inbounds that are not for selling me vendors or software, but I love getting inbounds if you're interested in learning more about Merge.
You can get some RevOps people reaching out to you about some services now.
Yeah, maybe.
Awesome. Shensi, thanks so much for joining us on Topline Spotlight. Congrats on all the success. We'll talk to you soon.
Good Thank you.
Thank you.